So why am I doing this? I'm starting this podcast because we all have a story and finances play a part in our struggles and successes. If we can learn from the many mistakes many others have made, we can make sure that more of us are successful. Like the quote says, to increase the chances of success, we must increase our failure rate. To be honest, I failed a ton. I will bring people from all walks of life, but mostly service members. If you have a story you would like to share, do not hesitate to reach out. From the go, like and subscribe to this podcast so many others can benefit. Welcome back to Financial Enabler Podcast. Today we have Swampy, quite possibly the most prolific EOD tech or bomb tech in the Ukrainian conflict. If you've probably found him in social media, it's Bring Me the Swampy. This guy's doing awesome stuff. Everybody that is in the business talks about him. And if you're a service member concerned about what's actually going on in the conflict, that's where we're going to get to. So Swampy, how you doing, man?
Very good. Thank you very much for having me on.
Dude, this is it's great. It's an honor, man. I've been following you for a long time, and you're doing awesome stuff. And it's so funny. I remember being in team rooms and being like, "Oh man, look what this guy just did." You know, it's just crazy. So you're doing awesome stuff. With that, I want to get right to it. What is your main concern with the UXOs and mines in Ukraine right now?
Right now, I mean, the situation in Ukraine in regards to mines and UXOs, I think a lot of people have to remember and look back the fact that this conflict started in 2014. So we've had UXO and landmines in the ground and on the ground since 2014. Prior to that, obviously, you had the Second World War as well. So we still have World War II ordnance on the ground.
Oh, wow.
But if we're going to fast track to, obviously, the full-blown invasion from Russia last year in February, just the sheer volume of artillery and mortar alone that's been used along the front line and all across the country, anywhere where the conflict has been, they're just levels that haven't really been seen in Europe since World War II. There's no other conflict that I can think of, or from speaking with other friends and colleagues that they can think of. You know, it outweighs everything.
That's crazy. And how is it because like you said, volume is a bigger problem, right? Like, yeah. You know, did you ever do any of the Afghanistan, Iraq deployments or did they ever do any of that?
No, I didn't. No.
Great. Probably a better thing. So to me, I just think of, we went from the sheer volume of IEDs, which is one thing, but it became very repetitive, right? But the volume that you can put in via artillery and mortars is exponentially higher. So there's a much higher chance to get hurt, I can only imagine. And how is it affecting you guys on the counteroffensive? What are you hearing from that?
I mean, the effect on the counteroffensive has been massive. And I try to play devil's advocate and look at both sides of this. Both sides are in a position where they really can't move without the chance of losing heavy amounts of personnel and vehicles due to the mine threat. I mean, at the moment, they're saying that Ukraine is probably the most mined country on the planet. Well, if we take into account that they said that it used to be either Afghanistan or Burma, Burma, they reckoned, was somewhere around 6.5 million landmines. As a rough estimate, now this is only off the top of my head, it's not written down anywhere, I would say that we're probably looking at the 7 to 8 million mark, at least, of mines in the ground. And the effect it's had on the counteroffensive is huge.
Right.
Because there's been so much fighting on both sides and so much laying, and that is on both sides, whether it be defensive mines by the Ukrainians or offensive and nuisance mines by the Russians that have then turned into defensive belts. Up and down the front line now, we're looking at a stretch between 1 kilometer to 3 or 4 kilometers wide, which is just mined. And the mapping, there is mapping that's starting to come up now that the Ukrainians have managed to make some pushes in the counteroffensive and take positions where they've managed to secure Russian mapping. But by no means does it cover all the mines around.
Wow. And with that, what you just said is something that I don't think we've put enough thought into it. How many mines, so how many are the Ukrainian forces dealing with a lot of Ukrainian mines and a lot of Ukrainian UXO as they're starting to push on the counter?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's something that we often negate, right? We always expect to deal with the adversary's ordnance, and all of a sudden you're dealing with your own. Granted, while you may have the solution to it, it doesn't totally negate the risk of the job.
Exactly.
Now, on people, how much stuff, or what can you share? How much work is being done by either no personnel with no EOD training or very little EOD training?
I would say that 60 to 80% of the people that are clearing mines in UXO on the front line are doing it on a base amount of a month's training, if that.
Wow.
As much as it pains me to say it, a lot of that training is quite questionable.
Really?
So we train a lot of units up and down the country, whether it be Army, National Guard, territorial defense units. And we try to get a minimum of a week with guys. And for that week, it is basically just mine risk education, mine awareness.
Wow.
The basics of DEMS, if you do find stuff and you are able to deal with it, it's a victim activated landmine. It's not seismic. It's not acoustic. Anything like that, we just teach to mark and avoid if we can. Even just being able to get access to a unit for a week is very, very hard.
Really?
A lot of the time, these units are being rotated off the front. They might only have a maximum of a week off before they get sent back to the front line. So you're getting guys straight off the front line. They've got their own physical and mental health issues to deal with during that time,
Right.
as well as getting their personal admin in order. And then they're straight back to the front line. It's a very hard environment to try and teach people in.
Yeah. How long are they in the front line before they get that week-long break?
I mean, there were certainly units last year that hadn't been rotated out of places like Bakhmut and Soledar for at least 3 months.
Wow. That's insane.
And that's in some of the heaviest fighting areas.
Okay. That's a lot. So I have a bunch of questions that people from Instagram put out. And so this guy asked, why the lack of pull lines, right? And maybe this is something that he hasn't seen. Are you guys teaching the hook and line methods? And are you teaching that at the lowest level? So this is basic.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely basic. Because of the sheer amount of booby trapping that goes on in Ukraine, we do not physically manhandle anything. UXO, it's a bit different.
Okay.
If you can take a look at it and you believe it's safe to move, then that is on the head of the person that's moving it.
Right.
When it comes to mines, there's so much booby trapping now. Even if it's above the ground on a brand new tarmac road and it just looks like a tank mine, we still pull everything from distance.
Really? Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you take like the standard Soviet tank mine, the TM62M or the TM62P, when we pull them, we won't approach them until we've done at least 2 or 3 rotations and been able to flip that for a number of axes because of the way they're being booby trapped.
Right. And for anybody listening, this is good practice, right? And that is something that I personally have, we have to teach to people that are way less trained. But sometimes there's a cost balance, right? That like, it's either only EOD techs doing the job or everybody pulling safely, right? I personally rather have, you can blow miles up and miles of rope. It really doesn't matter. Just don't blow yourself up. So I'm glad to hear that is an outlier and it answers that person's question. With that, are you guys using any MICLICs, APOBs, anything like that to clear the minefields, or it's all having to be done by personnel?
So we just don't have enough of them.
Wow.
And I mean, this is on like a government agency level. So we do a lot of work with VOD police, and they are crying out for MICLICs. And even they are struggling to get them. And this is the chief of VOD for the country, for the police. We've had access in the past to MICLICs. I've never used them myself because when we have had access to them, it was the Swedish ones. I forget the designation for it now. But they were missing parts, or they were missing manuals, or the rocket motors didn't work. It's a huge problem. And then if we take that a step up and look at vehicle towed MICLIC, the sheer threat from drones now, that lovely huge MICLIC vehicle can be defeated by a $200 Chinese drone with a Vogue 17 strapped to it.
Yeah. That it rules it out, makes it useless. And to your point, I've actually, I always laugh about this. I've been to South Korea and in the Philippines shooting South Korean and American MICLICs, and there's always a misfire. It's like, great. I wish if they always worked, it would be awesome, but they rarely do. So it's almost it's a bigger problem because now you have all that explosive just laying out.
Yeah.
So
I mean, just to add on to that.
Yeah.
What we've had to resort to now, when I was back in the country in July, we were just working with one of the main units making the push in and around the back motor Solidar area. And what we were having to do with them was a pile of testing on a range. And we were literally taking 50 grain primer cord and braiding it with 3 strands and strapping a water bottle to the front. And just how far can you throw this?
Yeah, that works.
I mean, that's what it's come down to at this point. It's all very well people saying, but Ukraine's getting millions of dollars worth of demining equipment. Yeah, but that's big machines. It doesn't go to the combat engineers that are trying to batter their way through the front line right now.
Yeah, and I actually just saw through our contact Flanders, I saw that new tool that you guys got that like unscrews the fuse and pops out the mine out, and coming like a rocket wrench or MIW, sorry. And I thought that was like, this is one of the coolest tools I've ever seen. I could literally teach an infantryman to use this. It's like, bro, just go put it on, unscrew it, you'll be fine. Leave it there for a few hours. If it's still happy, then I'll go blow it up. But that's really cool. Are you guys getting any other tools that are practical for maybe mine clearing or explosive defeat while under fire? Are you guys doing anything under fire?
So I've not had to in a while. I was doing stuff last winter, the end of last autumn, working with a unit outside of Crimea. And we were fortunate in that sense. We were getting shot at with cluster munitions every day while we were clearing, but we were in the forest, so it was a catch-22. It's a bit scary at times because they were making quite big pushes from time to time in the forest, but at the same time, it did give you a little bit of overhead cover from drones.
Right.
But that's the closest I've been to in a while for actually having to clear under fire, and it's certainly not been making assaults onto positions. It's one thing when I came back into Ukraine last February when the invasion happened, I have tried to predominantly stick to only doing EOD and not being involved in the fighting as much as possible, because I do believe that I have a skill and the background knowledge from the country to be able to just try and train as many people to do their job and keep their legs.
100%. Swampy's not valuable shooting people,
I'm too old for it.
Yeah, you're better off doing the EOD work, which is good. And for that matter, man, I have plenty of friends that have had to do things under fire, but I don't have a single friend that's had to deal with cluster munitions under fire. So, mad props to you, man. That is, I'd rather be shot at than get cluster munitioned. And what's the dud rate? Are you guys seeing an incredibly high dud rate from the Russian munitions?
So from the Russian munitions, the dud rate is huge. Even with stuff that's got a self-destruct mechanism, it's absolutely horrendous. A lot of it.
Wow.
Obviously, there's been a lot of questions about I forget the designation of the U.S. cluster munitions that were supplied recently.
Right.
I don't know what the failure rates of those have been like. They came in just after I'd left country this year, and then came back in, but I've not been working anywhere where the US cluster munitions have been used. I mean, one of the reasons for a lot of the the 3B30 cluster munitions is the simple fact that they're being dropped over forested areas, they're being dropped over tree lines, so of course the ribbons get caught up.
Yeah.
The rounds end up hitting the trees at oblique angles, so that firing mechanism just doesn't work.
Right.
But even when you look at just normal land service ammunition, the artillery and the mortar rounds, the failure rate is massive.
Wow. No, that's terrible. If I remember right, the 3B30 is pretty much like the M42 American submunition, right?
Yes.
Yep. Yes. So this is for all our followers, my followers and Swampies. The 3B30 is very similar to M42. It's a little ribbon, and the idea is that it's supposed to keep a pin up, and when it lands, it detonates. So we used to call them the engineer killers in our military. So what would you say are what are your tools of the trade? that you're open to share? Is like, what are your defaults? Like for me is a hook and line rope, what are things that you go to that you never leave home without, that it works with most things?
If I can, it's generally mine probe, hull kit, and a multi-tool. That's the absolute basic. If I don't have a hull kit, I've at least got 50 foot of paracord in my pocket, and I've got a multi-tool, and I've got a mine probe. Because of the sheer volume of fire there, it's almost impossible to use metal detectors. So the guys that are making the assaults do not carry the detectors. They will not carry them because for the weight of, say, the 6 or 7 kilo detector, they can carry another 6 or 7 kilos of plastic.
Right. I makes sense.
Whatever they don't use to dem mines on the route in, it then just starts getting used for chucking in bunkers once they make the assault.
Right. No, it's a good point, right? We always negate like, oh, I'm gonna carry this tool until it's not a valuable tool, right? You're better off using your eyes, and that makes perfect sense. How many are in this? I'm assuming the guys on the assault are, I'm assuming, much younger fellers. Are they mostly engineers, or you have plenty of EOD techs doing the work also?
No, I mean the Ukrainian military, as far as I'm aware, only has a very, very small detachment of EOD. Everyone else is combat engineer.
Okay.
So as I say, the combat engineers and the sappers, the guys that have been doing it for at least a year have their head screwed on now. We go back and do kind of refresh courses for them and stuff, and try to give them different ways of doing things. And some stuff they will look at and go, oh, that's a great idea, we'll do this. But other stuff you can see when you're teaching them, they're like, it's not applicable.
Yeah.
I'm not there to try and teach them this is IMAS standards, or this is UK standards, or this is US standards. Once you start doing that, you can tell them anything. You can tell them the moon's red. The second they go back to their unit, they will just continue to do what they do. So you have to work around these guys and to give them the best fighting chance, really.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys, even the sappers, a lot of the guys, they won't have a hull kit each. A lot of them don't have mine probes. The bulk of this kit they're having to buy out of their own pocket.
Yeah.
And the idea of having a Z-bolt CZ trip wire laser, it's out of the question for them because they're a couple of $100.
Right.
Some of these guys are only earning maybe $1,000 a month. So it's a lot.
Right. And it's funny how it all comes back to this. Obviously I'm the financial enabler, and the money is my thing. And I always wonder at the economic impact on the nation and on the people. You just said that, like, they're making $1,000, and I'm sure they have families to feed. Very few of them are just single dudes that, well, clearly they're not out partying, right? The priorities are different. How much are you seeing any financial strain on these guys when they come back? Is that like, are they just so focused on protecting their country, or Ukraine if they're not Ukrainians, that they have left the financial concerns aside, or it's a burden on the daily?
Yeah, I think it's probably a mix of both. So I think some guys, the younger guys and the single guys, they're in a position where it's not too bad. They get the monthly wages. They can afford to buy bits of kit because they don't have kids or they don't have a wife. They don't have an apartment or whatever. But for the older ones and for people whose family have actually had to relocate because of the war as well, the financial burden is huge. I mean, you've got Ukrainians that have obviously left Ukraine and gone to Poland because they've got nowhere else to go in Ukraine.
Right.
But once they go into Europe, it's so cost inhibiting for them that they all end up coming back to Ukraine.
Wow.
They have no other choice from a financial point of view.
So we've seen a lot. We'll talk about the refugees in Poland, but we're not talking enough about everybody that's coming back. Yeah. That's insane. Huh. And what's the cost of living right now, like in Kiev, right? That's the right way to say it? Is it really expensive, or like how are they managing on the day-to-day? Like,
I would say that most people do actually cope pretty well in Kiev. I mean, obviously the wages are a little bit higher for people that are living and working in Kiev. The cost of living is a little bit more as well, but from a Western standard, it's still very cheap. The cost of fuel at the moment is still quite expensive. I think that's roughly about $2 a liter at the moment. Wow. Give or take. I don't even know what it is in the US. Yeah. Let the girlfriend do the drive and save me.
Yeah, smart.
But the cost of living in the east of the country is quite cheap. You know, I mean, I rented an apartment for my team when I was working with military intelligence at the end of last year, and for quite a nice 2-bedroom apartment, I think I was paying $350 a month, and I knew really I should have probably only been paying $200 a month for that.
Yeah,
You know, that was the asking price.
yeah. They gave you the British price.
Yes, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. We're gonna charge a little extra.
You're not from around here. You know.
Yeah.
Military, you must, as the Russians would say, we must all be earning $10,000 a month.
You must be, right? Of course, there's so many money. So I wanted to talk a little bit about something that you and I did together. We connected through Flanders and some other people, and we were able to do an inerting operation via Zoom, right? Can you, if I remember right, that was at PTM3s or PTM4s? PTM4s, right? And look it up, guys. What was the system that fires it? The Gersh?
It's a magnetic.
Yeah. But what was it? What is the munition the system that fires it?
Oh, sorry. It's generally fired from cassette from Oregon, either Oregon or Smersh rockets.
They're Smersh. Okay. So it's a cassette landmine, and we got some contact that they had gotten a hold of some, and we wanted to inert them, right? We wanted to get some information on them. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with that, and what was your experience with the Americans that helped you out with that, if any, if they were valuable to you?
Well, I mean, I don't remember anyone else being in the room with me. Not that I blame anyone. Yeah, I mean, that was my first time taking apart a PTM4. I was able to obviously speak to you guys and speak to some other people as well, just to get a couple of pointers on it before I did start stripping it down in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Which a lot of ammo technicians would go, you can't do that. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't have a laboratory or a garage to do it in. So
yeah.
You make the most of it. It's a really annoying submunition to FFE. I think it was designed by the Russians to be quite annoying. The way the detonator actually runs through, there's kind of like a bulkhead in the main charge, which stops you being able to take it out without smelting the TNT.
Wow.
Which, yeah, under proper conditions would be fine, but maybe not in the kitchen.
No. You were doing with what you had. And what was that? What tools did you have for that while you were dealing with that with a PTM4?
Screwdriver, cable ties.
Okay, that's it. That's all you needed, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
I like it. I think that there's a point.
Zoom, if I remember rightly. I know.
Yeah. Which I think that one thing I'm personally trying to highlight is that two things, right? Like you said, that you can teach these guys the American way. You can teach them the British way. They're going to go back to do it what works for them in their battlefield, right? And we can teach doctrinal inerting in a shop with the right devices, remote devices, whatever. But that is not realistic for you in that moment. And you still made it happen. Is it the safest? Probably not. I'm sure we could argue that it was not the safest op, but you made it happen. So I'm really trying to highlight to young service members that, like, you can make things happen if you're creative and play it safe. But I'm sure that you applied a lot of experience. Have you done a lot of taking apart ordnance before that?
Yeah, I do. I do a lot of landmines, so I do a lot of PMM1. I've started doing PMM4 now. They're a bit of a tricky one to get the det and the booster out of, but the rest of the PMM4 is quite good. And I do it a lot with the Mon series and the TM series, and it's either I take them and I blow them up, or I FFE them and then I pass them on to units to use as training equipment.
Okay.
As much as we'd like to be able to send lots of money to training ordnance companies like, is it?
Oh yeah, Inert Pro, I think it is.
I mean, they make some great packages, but the problem is when you're not actually earning any money, you can't afford a couple of $100 for a PMM1 when we have tens of thousands of them. So just FFE them and get on with it.
So what is the main purpose? So your main purpose in inerting them is to put them back out to units to train.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, we just blow everything in situ because, as I say, the booby trapping now is getting quite technical. It's still pretty much caveman techniques, a lot of mechanical stuff, but it's becoming so peripheral. You just can't trust anything. It's like, why would I even bother? If I can just go in and dem it in place, fine. I put a video up the other day, I think you might have seen it, of me probing around a PMM2. A lot of people were saying, well, we know it's a PMM2, just blow it up. That's great, but what we're seeing in some places in Ukraine, depending on what Russian units have actually laid the mines, we have had cases where even AP mines, they're having deck cord daisy chains put underneath them.
Oh, wow.
If that just leads down the track to a 152 or whatever, okay, so be it. It's not good, but it's not the worst case scenario. And if that then runs above ground and goes into a couple of directional mines aiming up and down the track, I want to know about that before I start damming stuff, because in a lot of places we don't have the space to be able to go back 100 meters to a safe distance or 50 meters to a safe distance. We got to keep pushing. We got to keep moving.
Yeah. It's funny to me to think that, like, armchair quarterback in a guy disarming a landmine. And it's like,
they're welcome to do it,
Yeah, of course. It's just funny, right? Yeah. It's like, great. You have any opinions? You want to come and do it? No, most people are not.
I'm always open to constructive criticism.
Right.
Because my route into EUD wasn't the normal route, as a lot of people would do, I've relied quite heavily on the good grace of EUD techs and ammo technicians and other people providing me with information for me to be able to learn and survive. That's what's happened. So constructive criticism, absolutely fine.
Yeah. How did you learn EOD? Was it just in the battlefield? Or did you just get a cert from a cereal box?
Oh, no, I got a hurt locker,
You just put it on replay, right?
Just play it in my sleep,
Yeah.
VR headset on. No, so I joined the British Army in 2000, but I busted my knee, and I came out in 2001. I was quite annoyed by that. But to be honest, if I'd have stayed in the British Mail, I probably never would have gone down the EOD route. It wasn't something that I even thought about at that point. But I started getting involved in Southeast Asia, in Myanmar, with the Karen National Liberation Army, Karen National Defense Organization. Met a couple of old 80s, mid-80s, late 90s mercenaries that were there, mostly Australian, a couple of Germans and a Brit. They very kindly taught me a few things about explosives and mines, and that carried on there for a number of trips that I went back over into Karen State. And then on my second to last trip, I met with a British EOD tech that used to be the country manager for a lot of humanitarian mine action organizations.
Okay.
And he was in country as well illegally, but he was setting up a mine clearance project out of his own pocket in 2 villages. And I just saw the need for what they were doing. And because I'd been into country before and had a bit of a better understanding of how slow things go as a start, I stayed on with them and just said, look, will you teach me everything you know? And so we spent 6 months on the first project, cleared 2 villages. I've been back a couple of times since then as well. And then I got heavily involved with Ukraine in 2014.
Wow. That's awesome. So no true classroom.
No, not till I have been and sat my level 1 and 2 IMAS qualifications, and I just need to finish off doing my 3 and 3 plus.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's not, although it's nice to have those qualifications, they're not completely applicable with the work that I'm doing in Ukraine, because a lot of the work I cannot clear to IMAS standard. I can apply the safety standards, and that's fine. But to apply the rest of the humanitarian standards, it doesn't completely fit in a war setting.
Right. And then for everybody, IMAS is International Mine Action Standards, right? So it's a big deal to be able to do mine clearance in UXO work, to those standards post-conflict, right? Am I correct? Swampy is after conflict. So doing it in conflict, those standards are out the door. And it's funny, I was teaching the Filipinos IMAS, and they're like, yeah, great. I want to do this now. We're about to do it live, and it's totally different. So what would you say is, what are the things that you need? What do geodetics and engineers need to be successful from here on out with the conflict? Or is it just a sheer matter of like more people to do the work?
As in Ukraine, yes?
Yes.
It's a mix of things. So a more standardized amount of standardized training would be better. I think anyone that's having to deal with mines in UXO who are supposed to be a sapper and
right
should be getting a minimum of a month's training. I know it's hard for them to pull people off the front line to be able to do that, but if they don't do it, they're not going to get anywhere. The second thing is the understanding that a sapper is just part of the cog. He's part of the machine. Just because you need 1,000 meters clearing to an enemy trench, and these are the distances we're talking about. We're not talking about clearing the last 25 meters before an assault. We can be talking clearing a kilometer, 2 kilometers, 2.5 kilometers leading up to the assault, and then having to jump in with the assault team to then clear as they go through. So you can imagine the mental and physical strain on these guys.
Right.
By the time they've even got to the firefight. So they need, from outside support, they need the support with equipment. They need the support with good training. And then from an internal level, they do need the support from their units and their battalions and their regiments to be able to accomplish the mission properly.
Right. It's so complex. We forget how complex this job is when you're out in the moment. And I can't imagine how long it takes to clear a kilometer of mines, right? Like we would have to sweep kilometers to get vehicles in Afghanistan, but we're talking about like max 2 IEDs. We're not talking like 10, 20, maybe 50 mines, right? Which with that, how many mines do you normally see in a kilometer? Or like, what's the most you've seen, better said?
So I'm very specific on how I actually pick my routes when I am clearing. I will take the path of least resistance where I think there's going to be least mines. If I'm just clearing a route for the military to get them from point A to point B, I will look at the quickest route that I can take for them and the quickest route that I can clear. But you will see hundreds of mines.
Hundreds
of mines, depending on the area that you're in. So some of the areas that are being breached by Ukrainian forces at the moment, we're being told that there's contamination of between 4 to 5 mines per square meter. And I've seen the photos. I'd be happy to share privately with you some of the photos of that.
Right.
Because if you look at kind of the aerial footage of Ukraine in the east, if you take yourself out of the villages, out of the towns and cities, it's just patchwork of fields.
Right.
And cross-sectioning these fields is tree lines. Now, Ukrainian forces really cannot push across those open fields. They just open themselves up to drone attack, to rocket artillery and mortar attack, and then obviously tank fire as well. So they cannot really make big open ground pushes without losing a lot of vehicles. So what you have is the infantry pushing up through these tree lines to try and flush the Russians out, tree line by tree line. And at the moment, in a lot of the places, the Russians are only using skeleton crews in these tree lines. A tree line that's maybe 800 meters to 1,000 meters long, it might only have 6 to 8 guys at the closest part towards the Ukrainians. But if the Ukrainians make a push, the Russians have already laid so many landmines, they literally have rat runs between the tree line, running through the tree line. And as they pull back, they will have caches of PMM2 or PMM4 in rucksacks. And they will just litter them as they go. And they're only surface laid. But that's all it needs, it's all it needs to be.
It's more than enough, yeah. And I'm sure that there's plenty of infantrymen stepping on them, though like it's pretty obvious to see it. But in that moment, you're focused on shooting or following a guy, which is that's insane, right? We talked in Afghanistan back laying IEDs right? I've never had to deal with backlayed PMNs. Sounds way worse. I don't want to deal with that. So, since it's big on the news, what are you hearing of Prigozhin dying? Is that a big boost of morale for the Ukrainian forces and the allied forces that are there? Or is this just part of the cog, if it's true at all?
Given that today, I don't know if it's still today in Ukraine at the moment, but it is Ukrainian Independence Day, I think it's an absolutely fantastic thing.
Yeah, good.
I wish it could have happened a bit sooner, but there is always, I do like to play devil's advocate. There is always in the back of my mind going, is it real? Is it just him getting a retirement policy effectively? There is always two sides to it. And even if they turn around and said, oh, here's the DNA evidence, well, how the hell am I supposed to know? But I'd like to think he's dead. The only question now is what will happen with Wagner, because Putin and Russia will not want Wagner to go away. They've been doing a lot to bring in money from places like Africa, from guarding mineral resources and oil resources. So I don't think Putin would want to see Wagner gone anytime soon. But having a change of leadership would be helpful to the Russians at this point.
Yeah. With that, have you noticed because again, I've never spoken to anybody about this. Is there a drastic difference in the quality of fighter from Wagner compared to the regular Russian army?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Definitely.
Wow. That's it.
The as far as we're aware, the paid soldiers of Wagner, not the ones that are dragged out of the prisons, but the ex-Russian Marines and the ex-Russian paratroopers and FSB guys and people that had joined on to Wagner were being paid good money.
Wow.
They had a good reason to fight.
Right.
From a financial point of view, yes, it's mercenary work, but mercenary work, private security company, where'd you find the balance, But the quality of their fighters, I do believe, was much better than what the Ukrainians are dealing with the Russian army. They certainly seem to be able to take ground back a little bit better now. So we'll just have to see what happens, really.
Yeah. Are the mine TTPs about the same amongst Wagner and the Russian army, or can you guys tell a difference?
You know what? A lot of the time, there's honestly no rhyme nor reason to how a lot of the mines are laid. If we look at the, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this or not. If
you can,
okay. If we look at the absolute clusterfuck, which is the mine right now. Sorry, that 1 to 3 kilometer kind of strip of no man's land. It's offensive mines, it's defensive mines, it's nuisance mines, it's cluster munitions. It's it's booby traps, and there will be the odd IEDs mixed in with it. And there's no true mapping to this. It's just chaos.
Wow.
Thankfully, one of the things that is actually working now is thermal drones on like DJIs. It's something that myself and my team are looking to try and get at the moment, because for stuff that's surface laid, it is actually working really well. It's
nice.
But then if we look behind the Russian front line at the moment, and all the way back to where the main Russian lines are dug in, this is where you do start to see more standardized minefields that have been in place. And there is a couple of Russian mine maps that have been found. I do have copies of them. And these are, they're proper produced mine maps. They give you the grid references. They give you the type of mines that have been put in, the amount of mines that have been put in. And I'll send you a picture privately, and the numbers are staggering. I mean, one of these maps, it doesn't show a huge area. It's maybe 5 by 3K, I think. I've not had time to actually properly look at the map, but in that area alone, there's 16,700 TM62s alone. That's just one map. And that's mine. There's like 10 different mine sets on there.
That is insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, how do you can't even compare that with a bad day in Afghanistan with 20 IEDs.
No,
Like,
I mean, there was an interesting bit of TV footage put out not so long ago, and it was Ukrainian soldiers being trained on the Leopards in Germany. And they were being interviewed by a news crew and how did they feel about the training. And the Ukrainians said, well, the tank training is fantastic and we're really, really grateful. Thank you very much. However, when we asked the Germans, what do we do about the minefield? How do we go across the minefield? The Germans just told them to drive around it. It's like, don't think you fully understand the situation on the ground here. It's almost 1,000 kilometers of minefield up and down the front line.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no going around it.
No.
Yeah. That is insane. Now, on the projectiles, guided missiles, what are your TTPs with those? Are you just trying to blow in place, remote move them to a better place, or are you guys having to render safe a lot?
It totally depends on the state of the fusing.
Right.
Yeah, it all just comes down to the fusing. So if it's something that's coming and knock the fuse off, I'll literally just pick it up and get rid of it. I'm not too worried about that. Obviously, with rockets and stuff, we do want to make sure that obviously the rocket motor is completely burnt out. I'm not a big fan of moving even small stuff like RPGs because of it being piezoelectric. I'm not a big fan of doing it. Unfortunately, in some situations, just don't have a choice. So
yeah,
we just do what we can. If we can hook and line stuff out of the way, even just into a DEMS pit, even if we're not going to DEM it immediately, if we can just get it below ground level out of the way, we'll do that. If we can DEM stuff in place, we'll do it. The problem with DEMing a lot of stuff in place for us literally just comes down to explosive stores. It's having enough detonators, it's having enough det cord, because there's so much UXO. If you're doing single items, never get anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, and nobody's gonna be able to supply that sheer number of explosives for all that operation. So that's what kind of explosives are you guys using?
So generally Soviet PVV-5A, which is the same fill as the Mon 50 and Mon 90, so we can always check it out of them as well. We've been getting Chemex B blasting quarry blasting explosive. I'm yet to find a use for it. It's great for quarry work, but everything else is shocking. I tried to destroy a pile of 23 millimeter high explosive with it. I'm just grateful I did it in a quarry where I do a lot of DEMs, because I did have to walk around and pick up you kick outs after that.
Yeah.
It wasn't one of my best DEMs. We are getting American slab. There is British slab in country. There is German plastic. I forget the designation for it. This stuff's really soft. It's really nice. So if you've got something like a disrupting EFP or anything like that you need, self-loaded pack, great. It's really, really nice. I like that over C4 because I just found that this stuff is so malleable, but it compresses without any air pockets. So
that's awesome.
If you're using an EFP, you get a nice proper shockwave through that.
That's incredible. That's awesome. I've never messed with anything German. So that's man, you have so much knowledge. We literally could talk for hours. Now, I do want to ask you a little bit about finances. So and this is something that I always wonder about people. You're doing something incredible that is way beyond getting paid. But at the end of the day, especially now that you're soon to be a father, what are your goals and dreams, post Swampy at conflict?
I mean, at the moment, I met my partner in Ukraine. My partner's ex-US Air Force. She's a paramedic, so she was out doing paramedicine in Ukraine. And we met out in the east of the country, start of the year.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been a quick roller coaster. So at the moment, we're actually setting up a 501c3 charity out of Utah at the moment to be able to continue doing our work in Ukraine. But we're looking to predominantly do EOD, emergency trauma medicine, and then humanitarian aid. And nearly all of that work will be supporting the National Police of Ukraine. So we've been offered an official partnership with them once we finalize everything. We've been supplying them since last year with donated equipment and things. And at the moment, part of our team is now teaching English language to EOD, police EOD, in Ukraine, so that when they do go to foreign countries to train, obviously they have that language base. So that's kind of the project that we're doing. However, we do need to try and find ways to earn money in the middle of this. At the moment, I've got a little bit of consulting work with a training company that provides EOD training. So that's mostly across Europe, but it's not. It's really good. It's really good work, and I'm learning a lot from actually doing that work as well, because it's out of my normal. But I do need to be able to find more work, really.
Right.
The idea to potentially be able to do bits of consulting in the US would be nice, preferably from an EOD point of view. But we'll see. At the end of the day, once the baby's born, however the money comes in, I'm gonna have to make it.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, maybe hopefully I can help out with that. I don't know. I'm sure that there's people out there looking to pick your brain, right? You have invaluable experience. You're in a country now full of all these, my generation of guys, ton of war experience, and I don't put myself in that list. But now here comes a guy with the latest conflict, tippity top TTPs that are working, right? And you're probably going to challenge all our thoughts. We're like, oh, I want to do this. And your guys are going to be like, Jaime, the brilliant, I'm sure works. Do it this way if you ever deal with this environment, which is, I hope we find you something. So with that, post-conflict, let's say Ukraine is all done. What do you see your life with your partner, the life for your kids? Assuming you want to stay in America, what do you want to take it?
I mean, the charity that we're setting up, so as I say, we're setting up out of Utah as a 501c3, but then with an NGO in Ukraine as well. But we would like to be able to carry on this charity long afterwards. So that might mean that obviously the EOD work's never going to end in Ukraine before I'm dead.
No.
I mean, this is going to go on for 100 years to try and clean this country up properly.
Right.
And don't let anyone say anything otherwise. If they want to see a landmine-free Ukraine, 100 years.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's just a huge country. It's an absolute huge country. So from a humanitarian point to be able to say it's mine-free, 100 years. I mean, they're still clearing Cambodia. How long's that been?
Forever.
Yeah, exactly. So we'd like to carry on with the charity from the medical side of things and the humanitarian side. So obviously natural disasters in the US, obviously happened in Hawaii recently. So there's different options for us to be able to help in a humanitarian medical capacity. But I think from an EOD point of view, the on-the-ground work will be in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, my family's in the UK, so Ukraine's kind of in the middle of the UK and the US, slightly.
Right. There's just that there's always that real big blob of two countries right in the way,
Yeah.
Who cares, right? So cool, man. And one thing that I want to extend is now that, because I didn't know you were in America, if there's anything that I can do for you and your partner, right, to maybe find refinements to put more money in you guys' pockets, we'd love to help. And the ones at 501c, I'm definitely going to push it hard. But as you know, my mission, especially with your partner being former Air Force, is truly about how do we maximize service members' wealth, right? And how do we make sure that I can either put more dollars in your pocket, keep less dollars out of the government's pocket so that you guys can live the life that you dream of, give the kid the life that you guys dream of for them, and ultimately make that massive impact, which I just realized something, and I'm going to tell you, I was trying to ask you a financial and life goal, and everything came back to 501c3 in Ukraine. And I like that because it proves to me that at this point of the Swampy, your partner's life, there's almost nothing beyond that.
No, I mean, I know that the second our daughter's born, it's going to change a lot of things. It's going to change the way that we think about a lot of things. The most important thing in our lives will be her health. it's helping her happiness, and that is the most important thing. But as a realist as well, we also need to look at what makes us happy, what brings us as a family.
Oh yeah.
And that is helping other people. So,
yeah. And I love that because, and being in the world of finance, I'm fortunate to talk to a lot of wealthy people, and all of them totally agree. The most important thing is giving value. Like it's incredible to talk to a millionaire or a billionaire. He's like, it almost doesn't matter how much money I have if I'm not giving value to people. Yeah. And again, they've done a lot of work to get there, but you have now the value, right? So now if you had $1 billion, you would just have more impact, right? Maybe train more EOD techs, who knows? Which is incredible work, man. And I feel very fortunate that I was even connected with you way back, because you're doing awesome stuff, and hopefully I can help your 501c3s and help you make that awesome change for let's say not even for Ukraine or against Russia, just for the well-being of people, right? Yeah. Like that's
If the war finishes tomorrow, it's, you know, outside of the people that are actually clearing up the landmines, it's the families and the kids that have to deal with this.
Oh yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of Russian men that are like incredible people that are just stuck in this problem. And it's, you know, I can't imagine what it's like for these countless mothers and wives to be like, oh yeah, I'm burying another son. Oh, here comes another Ivan that we just had to bury. And it's like, nobody really wants that, right? It's so yeah, any final thing, any final messages that you want to send to your audience? You know, you have a big following. Any messages that you want to send for young service members that are watching the war, or that you want to share with?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think firstly, just thank you ever so much to everyone that has supported us over the last year and a half, and the people that have supported and followed me ever since 2014, 2015. Without your support, I would never have been able to have done a lot of the stuff I've been able to do to help Ukraine. I'm very grateful to the people that haven't supported me but have helped Ukraine, you know, and that doesn't matter if it's people that have sent tens of thousands or millions of dollars worth of equipment or $5 worth of equipment. Every single little bit helps, you know. Big thank you to all the serving and ex-serving members, especially the EOD techs and the combat engineers. Your information that you've passed on and your abuses has all been taken very well. I'm grateful for all of it. You know, I am. Even the abuse, something keeps me giggling at night. You know, when I'm having a shit day. I am really grateful for that support. We would always be grateful of more support. If anyone that's listening to this at the moment is in the US or anywhere else, if you have access to kit, old kit, spare kit, or if your unit has spare kit or old kit that they are willing to donate to the Ukrainian military or the Ukrainian police, I can help facilitate that on an official level, government to government level. Or just on a private if you just have a couple of bits of kit that you want to pass on.
Wow.
Lastly, to the guys that are serving at the moment, if you're serving with an EOD unit or a combat engineer unit, I would strongly recommend paying attention to what's going on in Ukraine. One day this war will finish. If Western forces will then be invited to go to Ukraine to work on the ground to help support Ukraine, you're going to be there. You're going to be dealing with this.
Yeah.
The flip side of that as well is one has to remember that the conflict in Ukraine is drawing a lot of people in from both sides of this conflict as volunteers. Not all of those people are going to Ukraine or going to Russia to fight in Ukraine with the best intentions. So the potential, certainly in regards to things like IEDs and booby traps, for them to start showing up in other places in the world or even back around our own home countries is very likely. So, yeah, take notice and, learn as much as you can.
That's amazing. And I'll say, and I'll tell you this afterwards. I don't know where you're in Utah. I'd rather not say where you are, but if you have some EOD techs I would like to meet up with you, depending where you are, we'll probably talk about that. But I'm here also to support you, your family. I'm just in New Mexico, not very far, but thanks again for the opportunity, man. You're literally a role model to young EOD techs, and way more experience than most of us. So this is freaking badass, man. I really appreciate your time.
This podcast is not financial advice, and it only represents the opinions of those participating. Our goal is to get you to your version of financial independence. Please follow and like on every platform.